Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Harita Balakrishnan, and I'm a research intern at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. I extend a warm welcome to all of you to today's ICS Wednesday seminar titled Japan at the Ballot Box Domestic Politics and Foreign Policy Choices. As Japan approaches a crucial lower house election scheduled for early February, questions surrounding leadership, political stability, and policy direction have come sharply into focus. These domestic developments are not only significant for Japan's internal governance, but also for the wider region, particularly at a time when strategic competition in East Asia is intensifying. How Japan balances alliance commitments, security reforms, and economic and strategic pressures, especially in relation to China, will have important regional and global implications. Today's seminar explores how domestic political dynamics shape Japan's foreign and strategic choices at this critical juncture. The speaker for today's seminar is Dr. Titli Basu, Associate Professor at the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. She is currently a Japan Foundation Indo-Pacific Fellow. Dr. Basu's academic work focuses on the geopolitics of the Indo-Pacific, with particular attention to East Asia and Japan. She has previously been associated as a visiting research fellow with the Institute of Developing Economies, the Japan External Trade Organization. Chairing today's seminar is Professor Shravani Roy Chaudhary, Professor of Japanese Studies at the Center for East Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. She has over 3 decades of academic engagement with Japan and was awarded the Commendation for Promotion of Japanese Studies by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Japan in 2024. Professor Roy Chaudhary has been associated as a visiting scholar with several institutions in Japan and abroad and has edited multiple volumes on Japan, the Indo-Pacific, and India-Japan relations. Before I hand over to the chair, I would like to request all participants to remain muted during the presentation. Questions may be posted in the chat box along with your name and affiliation, or you may use the raise hand option during the interactive session, after which you will be invited to unmute yourself. I now hand over to the chair. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Harshita, for a wonderful introduction. And I really feel happy that I'm chairing a session on a subject called Japan at the Ballot Box Domestic Politics and Foreign Policy Choices. What is very interesting about this particular election for Japan is that one, that 3 months back, Japan for the first time elected uh, women as a prime minister. Since her leadership, she has faced a large number of issues, which I'm sure Dr. Basu would be giving you people in full detail. But what I would like to now just open up to say some fun facts. Her bag is very popular. It is out of the shelves in Japan. Her pink pen has gone viral. She is being watched not by the men of Japan or the real politics of Japan, but the youth of Japan, which is what is probably going to be the most significant difference with respect to how Japan went to elections. Because if you look at previous many elections, there was hardly any discussion about the individual personality in terms of dressing, etc., which is something that is very popularly seen in Europe as well as in USA. So the popularity is going to be one issue that would make its presence felt during the voting. Unreliable youth, because suddenly youths which actually showed some presence during the last election when LDP scraped through to win, and at that point of time there was a social media driven political party which actually harnessed a lot of youth who seem to be now gravitating towards Takaichi-san. The other is the split that has happened in the Japanese electoral politics, in the sense that the LDP, whose long-standing partner was Koimeto, stepped away, and you have another party called Innovation Party joining with LDP to ensure that the LDP continue to be in power. The coalition split is now firmed up more because Coimbatore has gone ahead and now firmed up their relationship with CJP. The other is, of course, the winter gamble. We always know in India, we talk about how monsoon impacts or heat impacts voting turnout. Japan has faced a very bad winter this year. They're facing a lot of snow, and in places where there hasn't been any snowing for the last 3 years, and that might February is not a time that they've come out of the winter. Winter recedes only from March, so that fear is always there, and of course the entire issue of the challenge that Japan faces as the world reorients itself and the disruption that it is seeing. So that would also be playing some kind of a role. So I will not, at this point of time, bring in many issues. We will first hear Dr. Basu, who is much more competent in this field and would therefore engage with you. And subsequently, during the discussion, we might talk a lot more about the current leadership, the political trust of people towards, various various parties, etc. That is for future, post her presentation. So I would now invite Dr. Basu to present her work. She is using PPT format, right, Dr. Basu? Yeah.
Yeah, just cannot really call it a PPT because I just put some,
So talking
graphics
points, I think
together.
it's
Yeah,
useful
yeah.
on an
Uh,
online engagement.
yeah.
So therefore, over to Dr. Basu.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, ICS, for hosting this very timely, actually, elections because we are heading towards a very powerful lower house election on Sunday. And as the tone was perfectly said by Professor Roy Chaudhary, she is known for the current leadership and as the first female prime minister in post-war Japan. Uh, and I remember when she came to power in October, just 3 months ago. She was quite a fun personality. On the one side, she said her inspiration was Thatcher, and often referred to as Iron Lady. And yet, what you have charted her, bags and other, fun facts, as you put it. To add to those fun facts, I think given her history as a I think a hard rock metal band player. I think the optics are very well when South Korean president and she jammed together on K-pop. But on a serious note, I would like to believe that she is much more than that, certainly, because she could actually stoke very controversial comments on Taiwan, and we have seen a very strong reaction from China and sustained pressure, and very quickly things have spiraled and further intensified the situation. Also, she's quite skillful, I would say, because handling and managing a very temperamental Trump administration. I think she got it right compared to many other world leaders. Because this is given her exposure and her rise and the kind of background that she comes from, though she is a protege of Abe and belonged to the Seiwakai faction of LDP politics, but she comes from a very working class parents and comes from Nara, so she has a very different kind of a background. So I think in international politics, at least in the diplomatic stage, she has done well in terms of balancing, both. We have seen her diplomatic skills in, I think, right in ASEAN, East Asia Summit, APEC Summit, standalone leader summit with US. In UK just happened, and also the much awaited and talked about meeting with Xi Jinping in during APEC on the sidelines. But having said that, I think she is in cusp of bigger things given the projections. And if all goes without much surprises, then probably she is buying herself a much more politically stable foundation to pursue some of key reforms, because she has stated her objective of revising the three key strategic documents, NSS, National Security Strategy, National Defense Strategy, and the Build-up Plan. She also wants to further ease, arms transfer kind of principles that guides. So she has many things and plan and a vision in place. And we also know that 2026 will be the 10th anniversary of the official launch of the Free and Open Indo-Pacific policy, which was done by Shinzo Abe during the TCAD summit. So I think if she can deliver on what is almost, at least the projections are, indicating that it is not just a win, but probably the question is by how much. Not to take away from the the all the interesting alignments that we are seeing in Japanese domestic politics after a while, I would say. I think from 1993 we have seen that there was seismic shocks and shifts and adjustments. I think after Komito stepped out in October, when she became the LDP president and subsequently the de facto, I mean, the prime minister. After that, we have seen that new permutations and combinations is emerging in the political mosaic of Japan. So I would kind of very briefly just make certain points, both in terms of the trends in domestic politics, and a little bit on how things are going with China, and the challenges that lie in the even in alliance management with the US. So if we look at the current political pulse in in Nagatacho, it is of course running very high. Run up to the lower house is the relatively more powerful house in Japan, right? And if one follows the trends in the domestic discourse, both on leadership and legacy, or we ma'am also talked about the political alignments and how they deliver in electoral politics, is interesting. But more importantly, the strategic side of the conversation, because there is a larger tectonic shift that is happening in the post-war order, and the challenges to the rules-based order, because Japan is a treaty ally of the United States. So these things, have a very deep impact on the policy choices that Japan makes going ahead. I remember many of you probably have seen that in middle of December, Mearsheimer visited Japan after a while, I think. So during that lecture, he mentioned, which we all keep on hearing, is that China is the effective peer competitor, and US-China rivalry is going to kind of dominate the international politics for the rest of the century. Right. So, what this implies for the regional order in East Asia, and more importantly, how Japan should position itself. If we look at the latest, Trump administration's national security strategy, and particularly the national defense strategy, I think there is a, whatever we hear in the rhetorical side of, his politics, some of it is codified. Western Hemisphere is the priority. America first is the priority, particularly when, some analysis, gave more credit to the national defense strategy as a relatively between the two as a more serious document, giving you some clues of where US administration is heading. And national defense strategy does of the United States, the latest Trump administration does not mention Taiwan at all. Japan is mentioned only twice. In the national security strategy, Japan is mentioned, I think, 4 or 5 times. But and also when you read these, important strategic documents, the National Defense Strategy said that allies and partners need to take primary responsibilities of their own defense, whether it is, Korean Peninsula. Thankfully for South Korea, the Trump administration categorizes South Korea as a model ally, just like Israel and others in Europe. So essentially, making the point that you take your primary responsibility, there will be critical support from the U.S. forces. So there are promises of of prioritizing cooperation and engagement with these model allies. But we also know that when Trump administration calls somebody a model ally, it may last probably we don't know, maybe a week or a month, depending on the mood in Washington, how President Trump is feeling. Because even though South Korea is praised in this region as somebody who has taken up, who has spiked their defense budget, who has contributed relatively more more forthcoming. But on the trade side, we often hear that there are delays, and he's very unhappy, and that things are not getting, the investments are not coming in the same pace and scale that he was. So there is a back and forth. Just because it appears as a model ally doesn't mean that everything is foolproof. And if you kind of then look at at least the defense side of the administration, or the defense the Department of War, as they call it. So Hegseth is quite quite articulate about how he sees things. In fact, Elbridge Colby has recently visited the region, both South Korea and Japan, and the larger message is for allies to step up in the burden sharing. Now we know that at least in Japan's case, and Professor Rochaudhary is much more well versed on this, that the structural changes when it comes to the fiscal stress, or the aging demographics. So there are no easy choices for Tokyo. So the Japanese leaders need a very strong political foundation to steer ahead with kind of the bold policy agenda that it needs to kind of embrace. And Sunday's election is kind of is timed essentially with this in mind. Now, if we take a step back and look at not just Takaichi's leadership, because she came into the political scene very recently, in October. I think 4th of October or first week of October, she became the LDP president, and by 20th or 21st of October 2025, she became the prime minister. So she basically gives us a span of maybe just a few months to kind of assess. But if we look at the electoral health of the most dominant party in post-war Japan, the Liberal Democratic Party, so it's last 2 years have not been very great for LDP. Particularly 2024, 2025 elections, they kind of lost their long time dominance, and kind of became a minority rule, right? Exposing some of the uh, limitations of the factional fault lines and the corruption scandals and fund scandals and so on and so forth. So 2026 election, this Sunday's election, is kind of generating interest, not just because it serves as a litmus test for Takaichi-san, but as the first female leader, but also her ability to kind of lead the newly formed coalition with the Innovation Party, and to secure a mandate following their breakup with almost like 25-26-year-old coalition with the Komito. So it is also kind of it's not just a test for the LDP and her leadership, but also for the opposition, because Komito very interestingly has jumped on the other side, and they have formed a kind of alignment with the Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan, and they are now calling themselves Centrist Reform Alliance. What is the appetite for some or these new political alignments that we are seeing? So if we can move to the next slide, I just wanted to give you a sense of the how the opinion polls are, or the projections are. So there is we have to keep in mind two things. One is the public support for LDP as a party is not very promising till now, but the public support for Takaichi's administration, the cabinet, her own popularity is quite high. I mean, almost impressively high. So, cabinet approval rating is something that gives her a lot of confidence. And she herself, if you have followed the press conference through which she declared the election, she has framed this election as a referendum on her leadership. And she has directly asked a very simple question to connect with the voters. Because as we know, she became the LDP president and hence became the prime minister. She did not face any elections. So she is basically projecting that, given my performance and given the, very important decisions which are pending that we need to take as a nation, I need to know whether, I have the support of the population to kind of carry on as prime minister. So she's putting everything on her personal popularity as opposed or vis-a-vis LDP itself. So, and this is very different from the electoral losses that we saw in 2024 or 2025 elections. So basically, the idea for both her as the leader and as a struggling profile of LDP is to kind of capitalize on her, early days of high approval ratings and kind of regain some of the lost seats in the lower house and strengthen kind of ability to pass some of the more difficult legislations. And because as the parliament starts, she has to answer very difficult questions from the opposition. So she wants to go into at least that's what the sense that she gives, that she wants to come from a position of strength, that I have the public mandate and we need to go ahead with this. So basically LDP is betting big and political moves to kind of reclaim some of the lost ground in the last couple of years. Now, if we look at the opinion polls, both on the, whether it is on the left side of the left-leaning media or the right-leaning media, there is a more or less consensus that we kind of that she has the at least the mood of the nation is with her. But at the same time, we also need to pay attention to some of the voting behavior that we saw in the last two elections. I think for example, a very small party like Sanseto and others, they made certain gains in the 2025 upper house election. So the idea is in some of her election campaigns, the sense one gets is that she wants to bring back some of these younger voters that has kind of left LDP and during Kishida's time or even Ishiba's time, and kind of bring them back from this, right-wing populist, Sanseto and other parties. Because if you look at Sanseto's brand of politics, they most often praise Takaichi, but they have certain, critical comments about LDP itself, but not so much about her. So as I'm, the larger point is that, what is the objective of calling elections so early? So the objective is basically, very simple. They want a standalone majority that they often enjoyed in both the houses. They want it back, and in her assessment, this is the time, because one of the positive spin-offs of the escalation of tensions with China is that, she has a very strong in domestic opinion polls. She has a very high kind of support rate. So and basically, buys her more room to maneuver and negotiate the political agendas and to kind of go ahead. And that is probably the short term deliverable that she is looking at. But in the long term, it will also, if she can get this thing done, then she will have a much more kind of solid grounding for her re-election as party leader in 2027. So both in the national diet, as well as how LDP, inside the party, she is kind of consolidating her positions for the next leadership race as well. The interesting thing is, she has kind of indicated that she plans to kind of, if she cannot win this Sunday election, the lower house election, she will kind of step down. So that is also quite unique, because then she will be the shortest serving, probably the shortest serving prime minister in the history, because it will be just around 3 months that she lasted in office. So the objective is absolute majority in the lower house, which would be around 233 seats. Currently they have 191. Consolidate position and kind of secure a second term in LDP's leadership race in 2027. Uh, the other thing that kind of we need to, so this is what is happening currently, but as ma'am was also mentioning, there are major shifts unfolding in the political space, as we have seen the 1993, after almost 4 decades of uninterrupted liberal democratic parties dominance, they kind of lost. And so opposition coalition formed the government, but we all know that they could not sustain. And the LDP again forged a very unconventional kind of alliance with the Social Democratic Party to kind of form the government. And we all know that that was the probably the death nail for Social Democratic Party, because they compromised on their ideological underpinnings that they or the political anchors and the principles that they believed in. And since then we have seen that LDP and Komito has kind of worked as a very well-oiled machine, and they remained in power till 2009, when Democratic Party of Japan defeated LDP. Again, with Shinzo Abe, there was return of LDP, and then there is a continued rule, of LDP. And almost like an unchallenged kind of, during Abe's time, the opposition was relatively much weaker. So, but from 2024, we have seen that LDP lost the lower house majority. It kind of similar kind of fate in the upper house election last year in July also. So essentially, you kind of see the traditional formula which has worked for the LDP is out of the question. And the partnership that we see now with the Innovation Party is again very, very new. And how this kind of realignment or transition, how sustainable they become, what are the trade-offs, and if LDP actually goes ahead and gets the two-thirds majority, then what shape and form these alignments take is something that we need to again keep a lookout for. So if we kind of go to the next slide, then we will. Can you change the slide, please? Yeah. So this is a particular projection that I've taken from Asahi Shinbun, particularly because they are left-leaning. So the more or less, as I mentioned, that all the projections kind of show that LDP is going to make it, or rather gain the required 233 majority. And the projections for the Centrist Reform Alliance is of course, we have to wait for the actual numbers to come in, but it is probably leaving a little bit. I mean, it's not going in the direction that they probably have expected. Now, a word or two on this whole idea, because gender also became an issue, and she being the first women prime minister. But she also comes from within LDP, the right-leaning wing of LDP. So she has quite strong reputation. Probably her reputation precedes her when it comes to some of the very controversial issues. But she also has fair amount of experience. She has led not just as a minister for internal affairs and communication. She has also led within the party. She has also led the policy research council, I think more than once, if I'm not mistaken. And then she was also minister for economic security. So she comes with fair amount of experiences. She has when she was not in office, she has strong linkages and relationships with the Taiwanese. So basically, she's kind of known, quite well known when it comes to her positions on some of these issues. So the idea is that this election will not only give a public mandate to the new realignments that some of these parties have got into, but also probably give her the public the approval of that they have faith in her leadership or otherwise, and then how you take Japan forward. Now, coming a little bit towards her in the next slide, as I mentioned that I would like to believe that she is more than the optics. She kind of, if we have seen more confidence in Japanese diplomacy. She has juggled US, China, Taiwan, uh, including South Korea and some of the European partners together, engaged in some of the difficult conversations. And many of us know that she's considered as Abe's protege and trained, and she kind of is a flag bearer of many things that many of his probably unfinished business. So you see, there is a continuity in terms of greater alignment with the United States, no matter how difficult or challenging the alliance management itself becomes. She has a very sharp rhetoric on Taiwan. I mean, if you read the Japanese scholars, many have argued that what she said in early November in that budget committee meeting is doesn't dilute Japan's long-standing position on Taiwan contingency. It's basically the same. But then we have seen that it has not only sparked reactions from China, but China has taken to coercive economic instruments are employed, which is on predictable lines, right? So, there is quite a bit of momentum on the foreign policy side of it. And also kind of, and as I said, many kind of Japanese argue that, her popularity at home has probably, multiplied because of, her strong positions on certain things related to China and Taiwan. And it may provide her a good foundation and a stable long-term administration. I think we have to wait and see how that pans out for her. But as I mentioned in the beginning, that before the election only, she has outlined very categorically that she wants to revise some of the strategic documents of Japan, including the national security strategy. All of us remember the first national security strategy came during Abe's time in 2013. Then successively it was revised in, I think, December 2022. During Kishida's time, and now she is. So, we are seeing fast movement here, certain relaxation on defense equipment transfer principles as well. So there is a lot that she's kind of is at least signaling that she wishes to do. Many of the foreign policy kind of scholars or academics in Japan appreciate that she has demonstrated confidence, and Japan's diplomatic pressure is back. Maybe probably we had Ishiba before her. So and we know that the style of leadership is a bit different. But come we also have seen that the China part of it has not it has spiraled very quickly, and tension escalated because she has this certain comment about the survival threatening situation vis-a-vis Taiwan, and and how that is positioned vis-a-vis their idea of collective self-defense. So there are various opinions about it. There is a lot of support behind her, kind of because China retaliated very sharply. I'm sure all of you may remember that some of the Chinese diplomats in Japan has used very strong language against her, and there was diplomatic back and forth and things like that. But many have also said that strategic messaging and signaling is also something that this administration needs to work on. And frankly, I think even before she kind of stepped into office, I think she, as I said, her reputation precedes her. China already had a certain kind of a sense about, her. She's a conservative lawmaker. She has long advocated and invested in cooperation with Taiwan, and she has close cooperation with Taiwanese leadership. And frequently, I mean, when she was not in office, she was quite frank in her opinion about China. So it's and we have seen Taiwan has congratulated her, and so all those things happened. But if we actually go by her policy speech in inside the parliament, she has maintained the position that it is necessary for Japan to build a very constructive and stable relationship with China, because it's an important neighbor. And she has stuck to the expression of the previous leadership, which talks about building a mutually beneficial relationship based on common strategic interest vis-a-vis China. We have seen that even during Abe's time, and then it came back during Kishida's time, and then it stayed. So she used the similar kind of framing in her inside the parliament policy speech, I think late October, right after taking office, if we see. And we have seen that in sidelines of APEC, there is a summit. And if as researchers, we go back and kind of read the respective release by the ministries, there is a difference in the language, which is it is not the first time. Chinese side will always emphasize on history, the Japanese side will always emphasize on rare earth and I mean stable peaceful relations in maritime issues, things like that. But I think both of them did talk about, stuck to the phrase of, having a constructive relationship between the two countries. But I think, things went downhill after that, as we all are aware. Early November, she made certain remarks, as I mentioned. Basically, the sinologists in Japan, when I was reading, for example, Shin Kawashima's work, he has written extensively, particularly on this, and he was saying that his assessment is that there is no position change that has happened, and she has said that if there is a warship are used and armed forces involved, it could undoubtedly become a survival threatening situation for the Japanese, and that would kind of trigger collective self-defense, right? So there is nothing new that she has said, but what is new is that it is rare for a kind of in many of the writings that they kind of underline that usually leaders don't cite specific hypothetical cases. In her situation, I think in this instance she did talk about the Taiwan situation. But so the I basically these Japanese sinologists are saying that this right to collective self-defense applies specifically in relation to the United States. So even if a Taiwan contingency is there, it would be exercised solely between US military and Japanese self-defense forces, because uh, so that is their side of the of the story. um, and but there are voices inside Japan also which believe that maintaining strategic ambiguity is very important, and that such statements it's better avoided. But anyway, so but the right to collective self-defense can only be invoked under certain conditions, like if there is an armed attack, if there is a survival threatening situation, if there is an gray zone operation. And and also we know that that for that to happen there are three set of conditions that Japan has to meet: that the country which is under attack has a close relationship with Japan. If you remember the reinterpretation of the security legislations that happened on the reinterpretation of Article 9 during Abe's time, it said that the country needs to have a very close relationship with Japan. Now, uh, of course, that was written with United States in mind. You are treaty ally, right? With Taiwan, you don't even have a diplomatic relation. And second, also we know the out of the three condition was that Japan, there is a clear danger to Japan's existence, and that no other appropriate means of response was available. So all these things have to be met. Um, so there are certain questions that after she made the remark that whether Taiwan should could be considered as a country related closely related to Japan, because you don't have diplomatic relations. So you in the domestic discourse you see a lot of back and forth happening. But um, if we go by previous interpretations, the right to collective self-defense is not anticipated to be exercised between Taiwanese military and Japanese self-defense forces. The idea is between US and Japan. So so that is how things are. But we have seen a very strong, as I mentioned, retaliation from the Chinese. They not only suspended all the imports of marine products from Japan. You remember that after Fukushima accident, marine products from Japan were banned in not just in China but South Korea and other countries also. But and after a lot of negotiation, it opened, I think, last year only, and only to be kind of suspended yet again. We have seen a lot of backlash on Chinese tourists coming to Japan. So they have Chinese government has encouraged them not to go. So it kind of affects um, the local economies. But not everybody is unhappy. Over tourism is also a concern for many of the Japanese cities, and so there is no one opinion about it. But we also saw weaponization of export control. I think several dual-use goods have been targeted, and so I think that is something not new for Japan, because I was just reading that Japan has kind of, because you remember that after the Senkaku escalations, they kind of banned rare earth in 2010 also. So to China-fy their supply chain is something that is quite Japanese are familiar with it. It's basically, they say that, I was reading in Nikkei Asia, so they were saying that it is not no China, but less of China. And so you see, they are trying to kind of, they have reduced the dependence on China, because that time it was almost 90%. So Now it is not, of course, not ideal, but around 60% dependence they still have. So they're looking at, various ways of, investing in alternative sources. We have seen they have gone to Australia, they've gone to Namibia, strategic stockpiling, recycling, and also there are development of, certain products to kind of reduce the use of rare earth in auto industries and things like that. So a lot of I think R&D is also going into that. So that is something I wanted to just briefly talk on China. The other thing is on the US side. Of course, alliance management is a huge challenge for uh, I think since the inception of the alliance, successive administration has expressed their desire for Japan to kind of step up, particularly after Japan became, a very potent economy in the 60s, in the 70s and 80s. And since then, equitable burden sharing has been an issue. So Trump is not the first one who kind of, is pressuring Japan to do certain things. But and also we have seen the trade deal kind of come through for Japan last year in July. Auto and I think agriculture and other things. It also Japan has to made a commitment of 550 billion investment in United States, increase rice imports from Japanese farmers. So LNG, lot of things are there. So it's not. I mean, it's. Right after the deal there was not much clarity into like what exactly is happening, because both the administration was saying Japan is rather quiet, but US is very noisy when it comes to putting out on social media of what the deliverables of the deals are. So it did not kind of add up. And then subsequently in September, when some of the documents came out, it because I think I remember that Japan was under the impression that this $550 billion investment is about loans and loan guarantees by financial institutions and investment. But later Trump said that he would be directing these investments into strategic sectors, and he will be kind of in the driver's seat. But I think the gaps have reduced. There is a lot more conversation. Uncertainty is being addressed, and things like that. But it also says that it comes with caution and warning that US can raise its tariff rates again if Japan does not deliver to the expectations of President Trump. Now, moving ahead, or I'll just close by saying two things. Most likely, she will continue as the Prime Minister of Japan and continue to lead Japan. But I think one of the biggest challenges for her or whoever comes, if she loses, then probably it will kind of spiral some instability, because then you need to get into LDP. I think needs to figure out the next possible candidates and who comes. So there will be a little chaotic. But yeah, so but whoever the next leader is, most likely she will continue. Trump's visit to China is impending, and there is and the whole buzz about a US China deal. How that pans out and its impact, will be kind of will be a looming shadow on the Japanese leadership, because you may remember that Trump, not just Trump, but also the his at least his I think it was Hegseth or somebody else, Hegseth probably, they casually, probably without understanding the loaded term of G2 in social media, they kind of off and on drop these, references of G2 and what it implies for the region, and what kind of G2 they are talking about, or what it means, is something that, I would believe that Japan will be looking at, because there is also a discussion that a Japanese leader will be visiting US before his visit to China, so that there is communication is effective. The other thing is, yeah, so moving ahead, whoever the next leadership is, strategic messaging and how you communicate, they should minimize probably some of the avoidable, traps that China is looking for to kind of escalate tensions and kind of normalize it. That is something that the next leader looks at. And sorry, I forgot to request Akshat to change. The next slide, I just yeah, this is, I found, in the Chinese media, all the leading media, how the political cartoons, right, in Xinhua and other mainstream media, where they kind of started portraying her in a very specific way, ratcheting up her, ideas on history and One China principle and militarism, and what she actually believes in. So basically, you see a whole campaign against her by the Chinese. It's not just restricted to the diplomatic community, as we know that China comes out with all guns blazing, and I found some of these kind of hilarious. So I just thought I'll share some of them. So I'll just, ma'am, stop here and maybe hear some of your ideas, or if anybody else has something. Yeah.
Ma'am, you're muted.
Thank you, Dr. Basu. I think it was a very little time to, unravel the spectrum of things that are consuming this election in Japan. Key takeaways, I think, for us from this is effectively that there is a lot of serious contemplation that is going on in spite of whatever the media is trying to put forth as a very, a very media attentive place where only the leadership is mattering. It seems to be in many of the newspapers, but serious, fears and compulsions are there behind this election. And when Ishiba came in and then he didn't do too well in his lower house election, and the fear is always there that Japan might go back to a revolving door prime ministership. And if that happens, it would be critically uh, difficult for Japan at this juncture, because with USA's and its leadership, uncertainties that has been created in one side, and China, the way China is making inroads into the gaps that is being created by USA's leadership, essentially, and of course the entire region, East Asia, and if you extend it up to the Southeast Asia, and South Asia itself has many more regional dynamics than in the past. So effectively, this election has a huge role to play in probably stabilizing Japan's position within the international community. Otherwise, if this time, and she also, Basu said, if this time LDP loses or does not get the cross the 233, chaotic, chaotic policy making would happen across board, not only domestically with economics, etc., but also in the foreign policy. They will find it very difficult to move beyond how they are now, in a sense, having lost a lot of grounds during the last 2 years. With respect to China, as Dr. Basu said, her statement for many was seems to be taken out of context and made into a big issue. But that is also, a way what one would see is that China's way of trying to, trying to sort of destabilize a women leadership, which did figure in some of the narratives among the Japanese. It was also, I felt it was very commendable of her that she did not step back and try to retract that thing. She didn't really make a much kind of apologetic statements, which often Japanese prime ministers are known to do to their own citizens. She never did that. She kept calm. She just stood by it, and she made other people make few noises. But probably this was also the reason why Kyometo actually now really, really did not leave any space for it to come back to the LDP as a partner, because I think Koimeto is singularly known for being much more sympathetic towards China than most other parties. So, given this background, I think it'll be wonderful to see some good questions and some good discussion. It's a nice summer, winter afternoon, so I think we should have some discussions. And I see
Uh,
quite a few of people who are interested in Japan in the audience.
yeah. It seems
Um,
that way. Yeah, I kind of agree with you on there is intense pressure to stand up to, because everybody is out there to find faults in initial days of leadership, and we all know that within LDP's factional politics also. If you remember how she came to power in October, the presidential race, it was between Koizumi and her, and it was in the second round that she got ahead. So within the LDP factional mosaic also, it's not that everybody is very fond of her. But I think she has done very well in terms of not retracting her statement, or at the same time she has said that, uh, res- I will refrain from further, elaborating on this matter with, more details, because I think when I read some of the sinologists in Japan, they were saying that, what her position is the same like previous leaders. It's just that, is this when she brought in the hypothetical situation vis-a-vis Taiwan, that is what made it difficult. And she said that, I'm not going to elaborate on any hypothetical situations there. So she stood the ground, and we know how it went. I think I more or less agree with whatever you have said, so I don't want to add anything. I can see a few questions in the chat
yeah,
box. Yeah.
Harita
so
would be helping
yeah,
us. She
I
will
will.
read out
Okay.
the thing
Okay.
and go forward. Yeah.
So our first question is from Nazir Khan. The question is, how Japanese leaders see the rise of the global South, led by BRICS, in shaping its foreign policy?
Yeah, so Japan's approach to global south is something that is very much front and center since, I think, Kishida's speech in John Hopkins. I think you see a lot of articulation because global south is not a new phenomena, right? And if you look at the countries, Japan has been engaging with these countries individually or in some other framework through ASEAN, or any other framework. They or even in South Asia they engage. But I think we see, in at least in the political rhetoric, we see a lot of reference to global South, particularly in Japanese context, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So I think what took Japan by surprise was, how many countries refused to kind of take a side. Even because you remember that even though Japan is let me say that, at least as a member of the G7, only member of the G7 from Asia, and particularly during that time, Kishida was the prime minister. You see that he was very eager to kind of frame, almost unusually fast in framing the slogan, which became later the slogan that, Ukraine today can be East Asia tomorrow. And the subtle reference was again Taiwan, because they were very worried, Japanese were very worried what kind of lessons China is drawing from Russian invasion of Ukraine, whether it will incentivize them or, encourage them on the initial days, and went around the world across NATO meetings and all the diplomatic platforms they got. He was very articulate about that. But there was, I mean, in India, we know that kind of, value judgments you hear when you don't co-opt with what the Western democracies are saying, but or what Europe is saying. And we as a nation have been very vocal in articulating our position during that time. So I think if one great example of what Japan kind of how Japan learned that not everybody in the world is buying what the West is trying to argue, or not everybody wants to be a part of that binary. So when we read Kishida's speech that he delivered when he went for a state visit in Washington, and he delivered a speech in John Hopkins, one of the sections was dedicated to Global South, where and remember, he's addressing a US audience in Washington, and he's saying in that speech that, if we kind of ignore the voices, we will soon be a minority, because this is a chunk which is the rising economy, and we are on the demographics is on their side, the economic development is on their side, supply chain is all on their side. So we kind of have to understand that that there are diversity of positions. So it gives a good sense as to how Japan started slowly incorporating Global South. And I again want to kind of reiterate the caveat as that it is not that Japan was not engaging with the Global South countries. It has a TCAD Africa outreach program from the 90s. Right. It has a, very robust South Asia engagement, Southeast Asia engagement, and you name it, Latin America, and others. So essentially, it's not that Japan was not reaching out to these Global South economies, but Global South as a unit, because subsequently we saw that Global South became it is like its own competing space. Who is the leader? China, India, everybody is wants a share of the Global South, right? So Ukraine war kind of gives us a sense that the putting Global South front and center, and you see all the documents, the new free and open Indo-Pacific policy that Kishida launched in ICWA here in Sapru House, or you see the diplomatic blue books and others. They all started talking about or using Global South as a reference point. So yeah, particularly in terms of BRICS, I know BRICS is very like in a hot topic for debate, because how Trump has positioned his argument on BRICS with de-dollarization and other things, and very very confrontational kind of approach to BRICS. But if you look at all the BRICS countries, and if you look at the origin of BRICS, it kind of predates all these things, right? The idea of BRICS came from a very different context. And each of these countries, I mean, I don't need to tell you guys that even within the BRICS, there are, I mean, you find India and China together in BRICS, right? You find so many countries, and there is expansion of BRICS and things like that. So I wouldn't say that Japan has a specific kind of a something against BRICS, at least in the normative sense. But yeah, overall on the Global South issue, I feel this is my sense. I don't know, ma'am, if you have something more to add. Maybe we can come back to you. There is there other questions?
Yes. So the next question is from Shriyansh Mohanty. So he asks, in light of the strategic reassessment with regards to China, is a review of Japan's ODA policy toward China under consideration? including its potential termination and the recategorization of the relationship? What would her administration's, if she manages to get the majority, strategy be regarding China's expected response and the impact on broader regional stability? And the second question is,
No, let's
does
take one question. I
sure,
forget. So I think you mentioned ODA, right? Particularly reference of ODA.
yes,
So I think this is a little bit different because China is no longer a recipient of Japanese ODA. China is, I know they categorize themselves as, a developing economy, and they claim that they will always be a developing economy, but they are the second largest economy of the world and the largest in Asia. Right? So they are a donor themselves. They are no longer a recipient of aid, and they have stopped being, a recipient of Japanese ODA long time ago, decades ago, actually. It is true that maybe, it is common knowledge that Japanese ODA had a very instrumental role in building Chinese economy, whether it is infrastructure, trade, investments over the decades, 70s, 80s, early 90s. Japanese ODA had a very positive role in advancing Chinese. Development, but also again we have to keep in mind that ODA and is followed by trade and investments, and that is how we see that the deep integration between Japan and China, or the economic interdependence that we talk about today, the origins are there, right? The supply chains, the production networks, the regional value chains were built through this ODA, through these investment channels, through this trade, bilateral trade and things like that. So I think one thing is they were a recipient of Japanese ODA, and now, as you know, that India is the biggest recipient of Japanese ODA. Before us, they were. But today, I don't think her administration has to think about any of the issues related to ODA, because ODA doesn't apply to China anymore. There was a subset question that, what her
yes.
strategy regarding China would be, right? In terms of, I think that will larger be that will be see Japan's China strategy is quite layered, right? If you look at it, if you look at the economic side, on the security side of it, of course, we see, that Japan's response, like the current national security strategy that still stands until it's revised, categorizes China as the biggest strategic challenge for Japan, right? And it anchors its response on the US alliance and greater interoperability, and plans accordingly. But if you look at the economics or the geoeconomic side of it, we were talking about rare earths, and so I believe that there are two parallel tracks. You see that in East Asia, at least, there is larger trade integration through mega FTAs. Like you see in RCEP, they work together, right? Essentially to kind of leverage, economic benefits. But at the same time, you see that there is a lot of caution on economic security when it comes to critical minerals, when it comes to, high technology and things like that. So that there, on economic security matters, you will see that Japan coordinating a lot with US and Europe. But that did not stop them from, getting into RCEP, or so essentially you see that it's a complicated landscape. And that is how I think it will continue. If she continues in power, we will see much bolder security reforms. I would say she should be able to push through some of these. But yeah, again, on the economic side, I think, ma'am, you can weigh in. I mean, how she is positioned with the fiscal stress. And I was just reading and got very surprised that, on the consumption tax conversation, they are even thinking of, some parties even said that on food items and things, because I think cost of living is something that, and inflation is something that is going on for 3 4 years now. And so even if you want to hit the target of, I mean, Elbridge Colby always says that at least 3% you have to spend, 3.5 on defense budget. But where do you get the money from? Right? I know the aging population and social security. So those issues are, I think, she will be constrained by some of these structural impediments that's there on the China front. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor. So the second question is, does Takaichi's rise represent genuine progress for women in Japanese politics, or does it reveal that women can only succeed within existing patriarchal party structures?
Wow. um, Actually, I think Japan, for a very long time, and this is, I have not really studied gender in Japanese politics, so maybe, I don't have a very nuanced understanding on it. But Japan has been notorious within the OECD countries for in terms of female representation in politics, and I think it doesn't the global standards and the rankings. Japan is quite low, but it has. I think it is true that LDP has been always been a club of big boys, and they are the kingmakers. Successive generation had those. But that doesn't mean that, for example, if I have to think of, Shinzo Abe did cultivate few female leaders as possible successors, or who kind of believed in the same ideology or same idea of what kind of nation Japan should be. Takaichi is one of them. I remember, I think former defense minister Inada was one of
Yeah.
them. There are a few, but yeah, I don't think the database is huge for us to kind of conclude that, it's kind of progress on women. I'm not really sure how prefectural politics is panning out. What is the situation of, gender representation in the opposition side of the political spectrum? So I don't really have I have not looked at the data to kind of give you a definitive answer on, whether genuine progress of women in Japanese politics has kind of happened. There are few leaders that I can think of the current, in important positions that they held, but I don't know. For example, I remember. Was it the human rights UNHCR president was a Japanese lady, right? She did quite
Yeah.
right. Yeah. UN. So there are few women who
And
have risen the ranks. Yes,
Saichiko.
yeah. I sorry, I cannot recollect the name right now, and I am pretty. I think it's human rights. One of the UN important agencies she has led. But I am not sure how much of this is mainstream and how much of these are very isolated kind of developments.
Let me add a little into this thing. See, suppose it was happening in India, would we have made such a big noise about it? No, right? Because
Mhm.
we already had a prime minister who led us for a long period of time. And more
Mhm.
importantly, the imaging in India of gender is much more equal in I'm not taking whole of India, but the middle or this upper middle class groups, etc., which who are much more vocal during any media kind of a thing. In Japan, she becoming a leader had a huge, the kind of attention it got everywhere, whether it was national press, whether it was international press, was much more essentially because Japan is imagined as a country which is much more patriarchal, as it's been said out here, and it's the big boys club. The politics is considered big boys club. So how did Takaichi counter that? She said work, 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 and which actually boomeranged for her because people said this is not right. But then she put forward that she doesn't really go in for all this, what they call in Japanese, the nomikais after the meetings. She's back home looking into her files, which has been promoted as a much more stronger way of running a country than doing all the stuff that was considered to be part of Japanese politics. Um, will this lead to something? I think it will. You can see currently the number of young, especially girls, who are really following her. There are housewives who are talking about how they like to, be in the social media or following her in the social media because they think that she does emulate something beyond and a kind of not beyond, it's like someone whom they can connect with. It's a woman, so she would have issues that she would bring into it, which was forever forgotten in the Japanese political setup. So these are the reasons why I feel that is it a progress? I think there is some progress. Having always a leader who is of women in any country, I think, gives a strong kind of a fan and to another women, young, middle age, etc. It's like a fan following. It's like that's what they're saying. Sankatsu, they're calling it now instead of Orikatsu, which is a typical hero worshipping. They're calling of her Sanekatsu. That Sane is her first name, Takaichi is her second, so Sanekatsu. So these, I think, are for me small things that tells me that she, if she can handle a full term, it will make a huge difference to how the society perceives women in high places.
Mm.
So that is how I would sort of intervene at this.
How are things in corporate Japan? Because
Corporate Japan, interestingly, in single ownership companies, you do
mm,
see a lot of women now because they are the higher apparents were women and they have taken up like something like a rice polishing company has second time there's a woman, in the sense first was the father's one daughter of the daughter was the eldest, so she became, and now she has a daughter who's come into the board as an
like generational.
generational thing, which is very, very new in Japan because Japan, in fact, used to actually make the son in law adopt him as a son,
Yeah.
the corporate, made him the business head. That was how it was followed for a long period of time, right from the Meiji period, in fact. But that has changed. Now you see quite a few. But of course, the main Japanese companies continue to hunt for a van on the top, like whether it is Toyota, Honda, Sony. We've not had a women thing, but there are niche Japanese companies which are single owned companies where you do see women at the top. In fact, there is a student who is now working on it. We might have her back. Can we move to the next question? I think we
Yeah.
quite
Yes.
getting into.
Yeah.
So the next question is by Akshat Mehni. On the domestical political front, there has been talk about subtle tensions within the recently formed alliance between the LDP and the Nippon Ishinno-kai, especially with regard to reducing the number of seats in the lower house, something which PM Takaichi has avoided speaking about in recent weeks. However, less overt are concerns within the Nippon Ishinno-kai regarding being outshone by PM Takaichi, as noted in an article on Nippon.com. Although poll projections show a favorable, if not a highly rewarding, electoral outcome for the LDP-JIP alliance, would it be correct to view the internal dynamics of the alliance as relatively shaky to at least a minor degree? On the foreign policy front, would you say that the PM's overt position on Taiwan brings together the positions of former PMs Abe and Kishida, strategic yet careful and balanced?
Yeah. So I kind of agree with you that there are undercurrents in the alliance, not just between Nippon Ishin and LDP, but I see, I don't think even in the centrist reform alliance with Komito and Constitutional Democratic Party, you see a lot of, because they had such differing positions before, right? And Komito also had fought elections when they were with LDP against Constitutional Democratic Party. But yeah, and these are very, very newly formed kind of very at very nascent stage. So there are frictions, and I also read this particular article in Nippon that you mentioned, which talks about the tensions and she avoiding further any discussion on on reducing the number of. How she, yeah, there are a lot of going ahead. She has a lot of challenges. So one thing is, if she gets that super majority, then probably she can negotiate on her own terms. But if she has to rely on their numbers, then you will see a lot more compromises and things like that. On the foreign policy front, Abe for sure. You may remember that, and I think Akshatan obviously must have read it, is that Abe, he was not the prime minister, but unfortunately, just before his demise, he wrote that article in Project Syndicate that US should give up strategic ambiguity on Taiwan. Right, so he had certain expectations from the United States, and during that time, Biden administration and things, and how he thought about Taiwan and things like that. With Abe, I am pretty convinced on the Abe side of things. Kishida, if during his administration, I mean, it's some time ago. So he was, as you rightly said, he's very cautious. So even when the larger discussion on security legislations were happening, which country qualifies, which country doesn't qualify, he always sidestepped questions about, that without naming any country, or that, it will be taken into consideration when the situation arises and things like that. I see that given a chance, Takaichi will be much more articulate and decisive, more on the Abe side, rather than, Kishida's kind of. I don't think it's an exact perfect admixture of both. I see more of Abe in her, or that's the prism we are mentally conditioned to think. I'm not sure. I think a little more time will tell us about, how things work out. As of now, my impression is she's more of Abe and less of Kishida. Yeah. Is there any more question? Are there any more?
Yes, there are two more questions. So the next one
More.
is from Amit Kumar. Yeah. Um, this question is regarding security ground of Japan on the basis of one statement of Henry Kissinger that he gave during an interview with The Economist that Japan is heading towards nuclear country within 5 years. What would be the future implication to regional geopolitics if that happened?
Yeah, so essentially, this whole idea of Japan going nuclear is a very, very old debate. We can trace it from the times of, China's first nuclear test in the middle of 1960s. So this whole idea of, and not just Kissinger, Kenneth Waltz has written about, Japan will be a nuclear power country and this and that. And maybe it sounds convincing also, given the technological industrial scale that they have, the sophistication that they have, the plutonium stockpile that they have. So it won't probably take them much time. But I think the fundamental question, which from the 60s, whenever this question has arisen, we have seen is, in cost benefit analysis, Japan has always been convinced that going nuclear not necessarily, enhances your security or peace in the region, because way back, if you go back to the old studies from Sato administrations and other, during that time, they like of course, we know that Japan is a signatory of NPT. They have an official policy of three non-nuclear principles of not possessing, not procuring, and not possessing, not producing, and not allowing the transit of nuclear weapons to their territorial waters. But at the same time, we also know that simultaneously many studies went on, not just on the scientific side of it, on the military planning side of it also. And the simple answer is, if you go nuclear, you kind of alienate the United States. The nuclear umbrella may or may not stay. And it doesn't really add extra security to the region. Because if you look at Northeast Asia, you have so many nuclear powers, right? Russia is there, China is there, North Korea is there. South Korea and Japan are the only, so essentially it doesn't. So there are many arguments back and forth on the nuclear issue. Many believe that, Japan would do the best policy or the strategy is you keep the US nuclear uh, uh, you know, Article 5 under the treaty says that US will protect Japan with the full range of conventional as well as nuclear weapons, right? So keep it that way, and whatever resources you have in the defense budget, like divert it towards conventional weapons. So that is one. The other thing, so essentially, it doesn't really, guarantee extra layer of security for the Japanese, and particularly, they have spent 8 decades of diplomatic capital on nuclear non-proliferation. That is a identity that they have after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? Why would you want to give that up? So essentially, there are a lot of discussions. Even now, there are a lot of discussions. You may remember when Ukraine war happened again, it was Shinzo Abe. There was also a discussion of nuclear sharing arrangement with the United States. That discussion is going on till now. So there are various ways of doing things, right? But at least when during that time after Ukraine, when Shinzo Abe flagged the idea that we should need to discuss nuclear sharing, at least debate about the possibility of getting into a nuclear sharing arrangement with the United States. Like we know that US parks many of its nuclear warheads in different countries like Netherlands, Turkey, and many countries. So that time, we also have to understand it's much easier to say certain things when you're not in office. Right, Kishida was prime minister then, and when Abe says something, it goes into a huge discussion and examination, and there were many opinion polls. In fact, um, the far right papers, their opinion poll showed that there is a lot of support towards discussing or debating the nuclear sharing arrangement option with the United States, which model to follow and this and that. But um, Kishida, who I was actually in office, said that no, we are NPT signatories. We have 3 non-nuclear principles, so there is no question that we are going to debate any of these things. So these are not really new kind of discussions. This option goes back and forth, and you probably, because if we now look at Cold War history or during the time of Okinawa reversion, we know that there was certain secret understanding between the two countries where it was peak of Cold War, where probably nuclear weapons transited through Japanese water. There are no, we know that the classic documents were declassified when the DPJ government was there, and it was almost an open secret that there were certain secret agreements between US and the Nixon between Nixon administration and Sato during that time, that that if contingency comes, then transit of nuclear weapons probably is possible. So something to that effect. So those there's a long history of this. Yeah. Are there more questions?
There's one more
My
question.
God.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's from Zara. So, if Prime Minister Takaichi secures a strong electoral mandate, which aspects of Japan's foreign and security policy are most likely to exhibit continuity, and where might we expect significant change? And do you see Japan's domestic political transformation as keeping pace with the rapidly evolving strategic environment in East Asia?
Hmm. I think we will see a I think there will be continuity. Definitely, you will see there will be an effort, because we also have to keep in mind that the midterm elections are will be unraveling very soon on Trump. So he will become much more demanding towards his allies in terms of investments or do more of this, that. So I think every effort will be made by all US allies, particularly allies like Japan, to kind of, bolster or reinforce the alliance. So I don't see much change in the larger direction of the alliance politics. China, I think it will keep on the rocky grounds. So I think what we saw during Kishida's time, kind of a, you know, I mean, we will see much more fireworks, I think, in the China equation. Uh, on the domestic political transformation, keeping up rapidly with, if you mean that how domestic political parties are responding or their respective policy position, I don't know if I understood you correctly. So I think it depends on what the wave is. For example, even within LDP, we always know that there is a pro-China lobby, there is a pro-Taiwan lobby, on economic security, there are certain study groups, they advocate certain. So it's a competing space of interests. And how you kind of, negotiate and bargain and what are the trade-offs is going to determine. Rapidly evolving strategic environment in East Asia. I think strategic environment in East Asia is rapidly evolving for many years now. It's not something kind of such. And LDP has kind of survived. Yes, it kind of got shocks in the system, particularly as I mentioned in 24, 25, did not go as expectations. But I think they have the resilience to kind of step up and adjust and kind of, I think more than strategic environment of East Asia, I am more worried about what happens in the economic space. That will determine a lot of your whatever ambitions you have in the region, or in terms of your defense and foreign policy. You can say a lot of things, but without money you cannot do much. So I think how you turn around the economy will determine many of the outcomes of the foreign policy and security space. And that in turn will kind of design your responses to some of the regional contingencies that you see. So I think I am more than the political transition. I am more keen on the economic turnaround, so that things can be on more kind of stable uh, platform. Yeah.
That's all. We've reached the end of our questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Basu. I think you engaged with a lot of deep understanding of the situation that is unraveling in Japan right now. With the last question, which I would just give a few more head points with respect to the economy. There are two things that is very, very critically going to be the concern of Japan, especially because it is unraveling very fast. One is the bond market. The Bank of Japan has refused to support Takaichi at this point of time. While they're heading for an election, and therefore there's lots of selling that is happening with respect to the Japanese government bonds, which makes things very difficult, because bonds are a way of actually having money to make investment or plan out how you want to run the economy. The currency has been weak. Japan currency has been for the all-time low. And what is the problem here? Exports becomes cheaper, definitely, but imports become costlier. And Japan, in spite of everything, has a huge basket of imports, including energy. So effectively, there is going to be a huge problem. She is gunning for at least her first term. If you say that October to December, early January, she is gun for fiscal stimulus programs, which essentially means that it would rock the monetarist approach towards the economy, which has actually been in play for a longish time, because if you look at Kishida's New Capitalism, he was basically looking at the monetarily working on the economy to enable economy to gain some kind of strength and therefore its actions. Whereas she is now going to has talked about fiscal stimulus, and that has actually rocked the financial market. And this is something that the oppositions are really bringing into the foreplay when they are seeking their votes. So one would have to wait and watch. But yes, I not only second, I also third, fourth the whole thing, that until and unless Japan puts or can have economically stronger and more stable economy than the last 2 years, Japan would not be able to perform as more weight, put in more weight in the foreign policy. So therefore, I think her duty would be towards the economic front as soon as she, if which we are presuming she will win this election, she would have to first have a very good set
She
of.
better win this election. We have spent 1.5 hours on the premise that she has already
She's
won.
winning. Yeah, but it'll be nice to come back and talk about why she didn't win in the next for another 1 hour later. But if the presuming that she wins, I think she has to have a good set of people, advisors in economic front, to be able to turn around an economy which is actually sort of disorienting itself in directions which it's very difficult when you see a country disorienting in so many directions on in a single point of time. So with that, I think I must thank ICS for giving us this opportunity from Japanese. We are East Asia Division, Japan Studies from JNU, to come in and talk at appropriate time. And I'm happy to see so many of you having engaged with us. Over to Harshita. You may do your formalities in closing this session.
Thank you, Chair. With this, we come to the end of today's seminar. On behalf of the Institute of Chinese Studies, we thank Dr. Titli Basu and Professor Shravani Roy Chaudhary for gracing today's session and for sharing their time and insights with us. We also thank the audience for joining us. The video recording of today's seminar shall be available on the ICSS YouTube channel. We extend a warm invitation to all for the upcoming Wednesday seminar titled British Influence on India's Recognition of the People's Republic of China, scheduled for 11th of February 2026 at 3 p.m. IST. Details about the events can be found on the ICS website, or you can subscribe to our newsletters for regular updates. Thank you once again and have a pleasant day.